This episode of the Multi-Point Inspection Podcast is brought to you by Vesperio. Vesperio's Performance Academy offers custom-tailored solutions for service advisors and leaders. Last year, Jay Goninen of WrenchWay conducted a technician survey in order to gauge issues such as the important factors technicians consider when looking for a job, their current satisfaction levels, and where they feel improvements can be made. And this year, WrenchWay teamed up with ASC for the 2025 Voice of Technician Survey, using a larger sample size, which in turn should lead to an even better understanding of where technicians in the industry stand. So in this long overdue return to the Multi-Point Inspection Podcast, Jay breaks down the 2025 Voice of Technician Survey and how it compares to last year's.
My name is Jay Goninen. I am the co-founder and president of WrenchWay.
Okay, Jay, welcome back to the Multi-Point Inspection Podcast. Last time we did this, it was over the phone and we were audio only. So this is, we're tall cotton now. For those who may not know you, you want to give just a brief background and talk about WrenchWay?
Yeah, I'd be glad to. And thanks again for having me back on the podcast. It was fun to catch up. It's been a few years since we did the last one, so very excited to be back. As I mentioned, my name's Jay Goninen. I have spent my entire life in the automotive and diesel industries. Grew up in a small independent shop up in Wisconsin. Spent a lot of my early career working in corporate America, and still working with dealerships at that point, and as a more of a rep. From there, went and ran parts and service departments for a dealership here in Wisconsin, and all of that time had an issue trying to find technicians. And I always remembered when I was a kid, my dad had told me I can't find a wrench anywhere, and he was talking about technicians. So started a company kind of on a play of words of his, where we started Find a Wrench in 2017. That grew pretty quick. One of the issues we had with it was, one, there aren't enough people in the industry. And two, I don't think we were actually fixing or working to fix the industry. And we were probably more of a duct tape approach of that traditional recruiting. And so I took on a business partner in 2020. We launched WrenchWay and wanted to really give technicians the ability to do their due diligence on a shop. And so we have a job board that is kind of similar to Zillow, right? Like we kind of want to give that information to a technician so they can make an educated decision on where they fit or where they feel like they fit. And that part grew. And one of the things that we did, and I want to say this was 2021, had built something called School Assist. And this was really core to our mission of promoting and improving technician careers, in that we didn't want to just take one technician from one shop and go to another. We wanted to bring more in and keep the ones that we already have, right? I think that's more of a long-term, long view solution to our industry. And so School Assist was a big portion of that, and now is the fastest growing part of our platform. But what School Assist is basically a way for both high schools and post-secondary technical schools to be able to ask for things. A lot of them have budget constraints. They have time constraints. They have a bunch of daily fires that they have to put out, and their industry relationships can fall by the wayside as a result. And so with School Assist on WrenchWay, we allow schools to ask for whatever it is that they need. If they need somebody to come speak to their class, if they need a donation of some type. And a lot of times you hear donation from a shop's perspective and you're like, ooh, that sounds expensive. But a lot of times it's that small tool or consumables like towels, shop towels that they need. And a lot of times those consumables are coming out of the instructor's pocket. So we figured, why wouldn't industry want to step up and help make these programs bigger and better so that we're putting more technicians into the industry? And that's just taken off. We've got some great OEM relationships. We actually just partnered with ASE to co-brand and really truly partner with ASE to offer School Assist. They're moving a lot of their Adopt a School piece of ASE over to WrenchWay School Assist. And it's been really, really cool to see that part grow as much as we have. because I think we are attacking the core issue of our industry, and partnering up with ASE and the OEMs that we has just been phenomenal, right? We've got some great relationships, and I think we're finally starting to move the needle in the right direction. A lot of opportunities to continue to grow, but I think we're moving in the right direction.
Yeah, that's that's awesome, man. And you're hitting it where it needs to be hit. In the schools. I don't know. I don't know if we've talked about this. I don't know if you're familiar with Gwatney Chevrolet in the Little Rock area, and I hope they're still doing it. They were on about the time you were, so it's been a minute. But they had an apprentice program they were just launching, and we covered that, and that was just I just thought that was great, man.
Yeah, that was our good friend Jason Olinger. He's done phenomenal. I actually think he's moved on since then, and is still, yes. And I think he's doing some even more amazing things because he's in a manager's chair now, and he's one of those people that has the right heart for this, right? Really trying to impact change in a way that others aren't, and he truly cares about this industry, and you hear it every time you talk to him. And it takes people like that to put together an apprenticeship program like you're talking about, because that, again, is a way that we can actually have an impact on the industry that's not just putting a Band-Aid on a bullet hole.
Yeah. Now it hits me. I remember now. I found him because of you.
Oh, nice.
I found out about him because of you. And then, of course, I'm just 80 miles to the west of Memphis. So I drove out there and met him and talked to him. And
oh, how cool is that?
Took a tour. Yeah. So, and I remember the service manager at the time was telling me, or I can't think of his name now, but
yeah,
I think he was the service manager. Anyway, he was like, Jason won't be in this role long. He's too talented. So it doesn't surprise me that he's moved up,
Well, and it's a credit to him too, right? To understand that, I've always told my employees that I'm not going to be the one that holds you back from your true potential, right? Like if there's something that you can do that's over and above what we can offer, I can't blame you for trying to support your family and further advance your career. And, I people have taken me up on that over the years, and sometimes it's really, really heartbreaking to see somebody leave. But at the end of the day, they have families. And I think as a company, when we say that we care about people, we truly do care about people. And if we truly care about people, then why would you want to be the one that gets in the way? So as you're saying that story, I think that's one of the really cool parts, and we could use more of that in the industry, right? Like truly, I'm rooting for you as a person more than an employee. And I think that's, that shows. Like there's some people that say that and might not actually kind of truly think that, but somebody, like that. And I know Jason spoke very highly of him in some of our interactions. So great to hear great leadership in our industry.
Yeah. Well, you guys did a survey, and is this the second one you've done?
Second one we've done.
Okay.
Yes. It was first year that we've done it arm in arm with ASE. I think ASE had, we the whole ASE relationship has been an interesting one because Dave Johnson, their CEO, has become a really, really good friend of mine. George Arentz, he's a VP on the Education Foundation side, has been a longtime friend of mine, and we've done a lot of content together. But as we went through and started to formalize our partnership, that was one of the areas that they saw where they said, hey, you know what? We love what you guys are doing, and we think we can expand your reach. We think we can bring value to it. And so we linked up and with the survey, did it jointly. So we released the survey last year. I think we had about 800 respondents to it. This year we had nearly 5,000. And a pretty good number of them were ASE certified technicians, right? Which is really, really cool to see. I think as you dig in through the data, the interesting part has been even at the smaller scale, some of that stuff translated to when we had the bigger scale of an audience for the report or for the survey. And then there were some things that, I think were different, and maybe the masses voted a little differently than we did a year ago. One of the primary concerns that we saw was that we still have a lot of detractors, right? We still have a lot of people that are in the industry and not overly happy with the industry. And I think you don't want to, whenever you do a big survey like this, you don't want to go out and just paint a negative narrative around the industry, right? Because that's what we're trying to get around. We're not trying to kind of push some of that negative talk that you see on social media, right? Because oftentimes those negative people will far outshine the positive people. And so at some level, as we're going through this, you become a little frustrated, right? Because you see all of the good people doing all the good things in the industry. And in a lot of ways, I see some of these dealerships that are just killing it in terms of taking care of their employees. And then I see the opposite side too, right? Where I see some that aren't, and they aren't doing a good job. And maybe they say they want to do a lot of this stuff, but they don't actually do the stuff. And I think that's what's reflected in the survey, right? Is that there are some things that are concerning that we need to reverse course on. We need to make progress the other way. Otherwise, we're just going to chase our tail for the remainder of our careers. And I don't know that anybody really truly wants to do that. So it's really, when you look at the data, and we can talk through any of the data, but that's one of the overarching things that I saw was that I'm still very, very concerned about our industry. I'm still very concerned that we're not making enough progress to take care of our really, really talented people in our shops.
Yeah, I was surprised at the results. And I hear what you're saying about, you don't want to be part of you don't want to because you're right. The negative, people are always going to complain before they're going to give praise in anything. That's just human nature.
Yeah.
And you don't want to, but I would think with your sample size being bigger this year, it has to be more accurate. I would think just,
I think anytime you get more input from industry, you're going to get better. And we tried, I give our marketing team, Sarah Wilson in particular, a lot of credit for really diving into the data and cleaning it up, right? Because you can get a lot of garbage data in any survey, and she's phenomenal at being able to really dig in and see, who's actually a technician. There's a lot of people that just took it just to see what it was, right? So we had to get some of that garbage out of there. There are a lot of managers that took it, and we did a webinar yesterday where we talked about the results. And that was one of the things we openly talked about, was that I think we need to do the management side of this as well, right? We need to hear from the other side and kind of see where we can connect the pieces and connect the dots a little bit. But there were a fair amount of managers that took it. And honestly, there were a ton of teachers that took it, and automotive teachers and diesel teachers, collision teachers that took the survey. And a lot of times we always talk about the voice of technician within WrenchWay. One of the things we need to do a better job at is hearing from the voice of teacher, right? Because if that's who is really, that's who's developing our next generation. That's who's bringing in the new talent. And we have a huge shortage on that side as well. It's tough to find teachers right now that teach technical skills such as automotive. And so as we do this, and I'm sure each and every year we do this, we're going to learn more and more about how to get better quality and how to get more specific to a job title, so that we can really pull out all of the information we need to help educate the industry. And that's what it's meant to do, right? Like we're doing this surveying to help educate the industry and hopefully drive some folks to look in the mirror and say, okay, if these are common technician complaints, what are we doing to address them? What are we doing to get better at them as a dealership? And, I think if somebody were to read through this report and immediately get defensive, it's not going to work, right? You have to have an open mind, read through the report, and truly sit down and think about, like, are we good at this or do we suck at this? And it's okay if you suck at it, but we've got to get better at it, right? We as a dealership have to get better at it. And until we can do that a little bit more, I think we'll continue to struggle with this. But my hope is that each year we do this survey, we just start to see a little growth in the right direction, right? Maybe a little bit more of a positive narrative from our technician community to be able to tell us and give us feedback that, hey, we might not be perfect, but at least we're heading in the right direction. And we didn't quite get that this year, right? I think we went backwards, which is
Yeah.
again very frustrating.
Yeah, it was surprising, and it might just be because this is what I do, and I'm hearing, but like you are probably the number one voice in ringing this bell, um, and his name escapes me now, but Wrench Turner's, um,
Josh.
Josh. It, it again, it might just be because I'm in that world. I see a lot of you guys ringing that bell and getting a lot of response, and so just by looking at that, you think, okay, well, this is catching on. This is, and not that it's not, but the survey surprised me, and I don't know. I wonder if your sample size had been the same in the previous one. Would it be closer, or if or is it going in the wrong direction? I don't know, but I want to kind of get into the nuts and bolts of this thing a little. So 55% was techs that you surveyed, correct?
Yeah, it was 55% technicians, and actually, I'm gonna roll that back here just a second. So over half of the respondents were technicians, right? 43% being automotive technicians, 11% being diesel technicians. One of the things that we know we've got to do in the future is grow that collision side as well. We need to hear more from the collision side. So that's something we're actively working on. And the crazy part, so in the overall scope of job role, there were 21% of instructors. I mentioned that earlier, that there were a lot of instructors that responded. And I think a lot of them were technicians at one point, right? So they not only had that technical aptitude of being on a shop floor, but then they also have the ability to see how their students are treated after they go into a role. So their feedback is very, very, very important. We did have another 14% that were managers. And then again, our collision side, we've really, really got to grow because that was only 1% of the respondents. And again, we're working with partnerships right now to be able to grow that audience as well. But yeah, that was kind of the scope, or as far as the demographic in terms of who actually responded to the survey.
Yeah, I'm interested personally in the collision. I was in that industry for 13 years on the part side, in the collision repair industry. And I don't know. I don't know if it's because I've been out of it, but again, it might just be because I'm in my little bubble here in fixed ops, and I'm out of that game. I don't hear a lot about collision, and I just wonder about the independent repair shops, and just anecdotally, locally, I've seen a lot of dealerships who had their own body shops back when I was delivering to them, and they've shut them down. So I would love to see what is happening nationwide, as a whole, myself, just out of curiosity.
Yeah. And I couldn't agree more. I think we need to hear more of their voices out there. And I've spoken just this year at a couple of collision conferences, and they have a lot to say, right? And I think that's where we're hoping that we're that safe spot where they can give feedback and they can give honest opinions without the threat of maybe being fired or being reprimanded for giving their honest opinions. And again, that one voice might not seem like a lot. Like when you go as a technician and fill out the survey, might not seem like a lot, but what it helps us with is be able to identify some trends, right? We're able to look at a broad scope of technicians and say, hey, you know what? Something like pay, right? Like this is always a conversation and a debate on whether flat rate is a good pay system. And it's a really, really hot topic. I don't think it's going away anytime soon, right? Like I think there are a lot of technicians that really like flat rate pay. There's some that absolutely hate it. And that has driven some of those folks out of the industry. So, I think, again, that's another opportunity for us to dive a little bit deeper. And, is it a certain type of flat rate pay? Because I think a lot of times we'll say flat rate and that's all encompassing, but there's so many different types of flat rate pay systems that there's some that really, really take care of their people well and still give them the ceiling to make a big income. But then there are some where it feels like maybe the shop is trying to make sure that their best interests are taken care of first. And of course, as a business, you need to do that. You need to make sure that you're a profitable business. Otherwise, you can't afford to pay anybody anything, right? So it's just, even from that side, I've encouraged so many shops to have open and honest conversations with their team to figure out, how do you get beyond that surface level? Are you really happy with this pay system, or are you just telling me that you're happy with it because you don't want to get in trouble?
Yeah.
And really being open to feedback and hopefully maybe altering some of your pay plans to make sure that it's fair for everybody.
Yeah. Yeah. You hear a lot of people push, it's more about the culture, that pay usually doesn't, in some surveys that I've seen that weren't as extensive as this one, pay ends up being like lower on the list of things, but it's still, it's the top on this one, right?
Yeah. And the way that we talk about this is that you could have the greatest benefits in the world, but if your pay is terrible, you're not going to get that really good quality employee that you're looking for, right? So when we do the survey, we're taking into account, we're asking, other than pay, what are things that you look for in a shop? Because pay is still number one. People have to take care of their families, and they're, if they're not able to on your salary, then all the benefits in the world aren't going to make a difference.
Yeah.
Now, with that being said, assuming that you have fair pay within your shop, the top 4 are very interesting to me in terms of the must-haves in a shop. Number 1 is proper equipment in the shop. In our webinar yesterday, we talked about that, and it might not be just buying that new piece of equipment that you need. It might be fixing what you've already got. It might be making sure that everything's updated, that kind of thing, because really good technicians get frustrated by that. We heard that in the survey. It came clear and loud across that was the most important thing. The next couple things were paid vacation, retirement fund. Paid vacation, I think, is something that you're seeing more and more importance behind. And I think when I talk to technicians directly, this isn't in the survey results, but this is something that I feel strongly about, that the old school system of you get a week after your first year, and then that you get that 1 week until 5 years. And then after that, you get 2 years, and then 10 years, you get three weeks. I think that's a bit antiquated, right? Like, I don't think that somebody's going to look at that and say, that's a really, really good opportunity if I get a week of vacation after a year. And I even look at it from a personal standpoint, right? I've got a 7-year-old son. He's got a Christmas concert next week. Like, I'm going to take off for that Christmas concert. And I think that might have changed over the years, because growing up in a shop, my dad owns a small independent shop up here in Wisconsin. I don't think he probably would have, right? I don't know that he would have taken off for my Christmas concert. So that's a change in mentality. And I mentioned George Ahrens earlier, but one of my favorite sayings of George that George has is that, in his words, us gray hairs and no hairs, we live to work, and this younger generation works to live. And he always ends it by saying, and they might have it right. And I love his perspective on it, because I think that flexibility has become a really, really big piece, especially coming out of COVID, when a lot of automotive technicians or diesel technicians saw that their friends were working from home, and that they at times probably had a lot of flexibility, and they're sitting there saying, okay, we still have to go in the shop every single day. And we have zero flexibility. And, one other story I'll share with you is, like, growing up in a shop, if you had to leave to get a haircut or take a doctor's appointment, it wasn't even a management push thing. It was a cultural thing, like an industry cultural thing, where you would get so much crap for leaving to go to an appointment that you just never scheduled anything during the day. And a lot of times you just don't have time on your off hours to be able to get to everything you need to get to. And especially for some of these dealership techs that are working 6 days a week and 10 hours a day, that they just don't have time. They need to take a little bit of time out of their really, really busy schedules over the course of a year to be able to take care of their family stuff, their at home stuff. So
Yeah.
just a quick story there.
Yeah, that's so true. By law, they have to give you like when it's to vote. And I remember when I was in the aftermarket crash parts industry, luckily I ran a delivery route, but it was up to me, regardless, it was up to me to manage my route that day so I could go vote. Because even though it was by law, nobody really gave you the time. You had to make the time just to be able to go vote, which by law they had to afford you. But like you said, culturally, I just had to figure it out myself, because people were still scrambling for their parts. They still wanted me there at a certain time, and I just had to make it happen. But you're right. And I know every generation poo-poos the one that comes after it. I'm Gen X, and we got our fair share of, but yeah, man, I'm kind of a workaholic, I mean, that's just, I've tried to pattern my work to where it's something that I just thoroughly love. So it doesn't seem like work, but
Yeah.
I'm burning it at both ends all the time. And that's going to be, that's funny, not haha funny, but it's interesting because like you said, businesses still have to produce profit or there's not going to be anything to go to, right? So there has to be a sweet spot there somewhere because, you can't have it. And I think that's what people in my generation and older look at like, well, yeah, it'd be nice. It'd be nice if I could have weekends off, but they shutter the doors on this place and we're all going to have nothing but time on our hands kind of thing. And so it's interesting that the respondents, if I've got this right, 62% have been in the industry 21 years plus.
Yeah, that was another kind of trend that we saw that is concerning, right? Because what does that tell you? That's very similar to what the industry as a whole, if I can say that. We're aging. Like our average age of a tech is over 40 years now, average, right? And it feels like that's trending upward because we're not getting enough people coming into the industry. And the crazy part is, kind of going back to your prior comment, this is where I do think those really good conversations, those candid conversations have to happen. Because if you've got a baby boomer or a Gen Xer talking to a Gen Zer, you need to get on the same page at some level because that Gen Zers or younger millennials who you're trying to attract to your business right now. So getting on the same page, and not just the baby boomer getting on the same page as the millennial, but the millennial getting on the same page as the baby boomer, right? Like we still have businesses to run. We still have to be productive. And I have that internal fight even with myself in owning some businesses that you want to take care of your people as much as you can. And I think most people do, but at what price, right? Like I look at like health insurance right now. Health insurance is astronomically expensive. And I think all businesses would love to say, hey, we'll take care of your insurance. But from a profitability standpoint, it absolutely kills your profit. And if you want to invest in that business and make it grow and make it better, you have to toe the line there. And so I think, one of the common complaints that technicians have, and this was again another thing that came out in the survey, was that they don't get communicated well with, right? And they struggle to get on the same page. And something that sounds so simple and so easy is one of the biggest struggles we have in our industry. And I look at that exact scenario as a really good opportunity for a business leader to be able to sit down with their people and explain the profitability side, right? And explain why it's important and why do we judge you on your production, your productivity, and how many hours you're putting out? Well, because it's core to our business that you're successful. Mm-hmm. And so laying it out, and I think my favorite leaders are ones that aren't afraid to share a P&L, and they're not afraid to sit down and explain what the lines mean on that P&L. And I think a lot of times business leaders won't do that because they're concerned that somebody's going to see how much money they're making and they're going to automatically assume like, oh my goodness, this person's just, they're selfish, they're taking care of themselves. And at some level that can be true, right? Like you go into business for a reason. You're not going into business to, as a charity.
Right.
But if you sit down and you walk through that P&L and say, hey, listen, if we're successful, you're successful with me. And here's what that looks like. And, that goes down to having a career plan for somebody. Hey, are you just trying to stick me in the back bay as a tech for the rest of my life? And maybe that tech wants to do that. Fine. But at least have the conversation and then help educate them on the business, because that helps open up so much communication. It's not like you're holding your cards close to your vest anymore. You're having really honest conversations with people. And I think a lot of technicians would be surprised at how little some of these shops net, right? Like there's some that do a really, really good job, but I think a lot of them, because we haven't trained them well enough, they look at their hourly rate of what they get paid versus the door rate of the shop. And there's this big difference in between, and they don't truly understand all of the overhead that goes into running a good shop. It is not cheap to run a shop. And so again, that's where that transparency and that communication comes in, and being honest about it. And honestly, like even being honest about, as an owner, you want to make money. That's why you're doing it. You're not doing it just because you love coming in every day. Maybe you are, but like for the most part, I think people want to improve their personal situations. They want to get in a better spot. And the more we can maybe stop hiding behind that and just say, hey, lay out the cards. Here's everything in a candid fashion. I think you just build so much more trust that way.
Yeah, I think that education is important, because it looks like if you don't have any knowledge of the inner workings of profit and loss, and you're just there, and I don't mean this as derogatory as it sounds, because I have been there, and it was just youth. I remember when I first started working for a grocery store, I didn't understand profit and loss. I didn't understand markup, buying wholesale, selling retail. I didn't understand any of that. I just thought it was there. And I'm not saying that a lot of technicians do, but when you're young, you just don't know. When I got into the aftermarket crash parts thing, and I was kind of a runner, I was a jack of all trades. I'd do everything. The warehouse, then I'd go run around, and I was on the clock. And a big deal was bringing new damaged parts, of course, you'd catch hell for it. And I was just trying to I'd mark it down to whatever they asked me to, because I just wanted them to keep the part, be happy, and go on to the next stop. Well, once they put me on commission and I got paid off of a percentage off of what I sold, I started looking at what those fenders cost, what our cost was, and realizing, you can't discount it this much, because then you're going to be in the red, and then you're going to be out of a job. That made all the difference, man, because you're running your own little business at that point as a business owner. And I think that education is just paramount. You have to have that, otherwise you just think it's a bunch of fat cats rolling, smoking cigars and lighting them with $100 bills. I mean,
I think you're so spot on. And that is where I think flat rate for a technician does make a lot of sense, right? Because it is, you're controlling what you're getting, you're controlling your output, you're controlling, so much more. I think where people with flat rate kind of freak out is that, if you go through a week where the shop's slow, you don't have a lot of ability to control that, other than maybe you did some really good inspections where others don't. And you've got a service advisor that properly communicates that. But there are times where you're a good technician with a bad service advisor, and you're handcuffed. You don't have any control over that. And I think that, along with maybe not having the floor of a guarantee, is what really, really is concerning to people. Because if I have to go home to my spouse and say, hey, this week we just didn't have any work, I don't know if we're going to be able to afford groceries this week.
Yeah.
Like, that's what everybody's terrified about, right? Like that's the downside of it is so drastic that it kind of overshadows the upside, which there's a lot of upside if they handle it right. But, I think that's where those honest conversations come in as an industry. We've tried to have a lot of those conversations through WrenchWay, where we basically say we get both sides. Like, we understand why a dealership wants to pay flat rate, or any shop wants to pay flat rate. We also understand the technician side of, very concerned about their own personal well-being. And the more we can have those good, transparent conversations, I think the closer we get to getting on common ground and maybe changing some of the perception that we see in our survey results.
Yeah. So it changed from last year. What technicians want, hourly or salary, was up and flat rate was down. Did that surprise you, or did you see that coming?
I think I saw it coming. I think it was, even with that question, it's a little bit of low hanging fruit because we almost know the response ahead of time. And that, on that question specifically, where you're going to get a negative narrative around flat rate. And a lot of times it's hard for me, right? And that's the one where you're like, okay, let's have some more open conversations about it. Like, what are the concerns of the ownership? What are the concerns of the technicians? What are the concerns of everybody involved? Because then we can actually talk about how we make it good for everybody. And so, yes, I wasn't surprised with that one, that traditional flat rate went down. I was surprised, and this we talked about in the webinar as well, that hourly or salary went above hourly with production bonus. And so when we looked at that, a year ago, hourly with production bonus was the leader in the clubhouse. But excuse me, there were some assumptions that were made. And I think in looking at it, I think when a technician looks at this, they say, okay, hourly with production bonus means that my hourly rate is going to be lower. That I'm going to get paid less up front. And that might be more of that floor that I'm talking about with flat rate that people are looking for. Whereas the hourly or salary, they just know what they're going to take home every week. Like, it's going to be the same every week unless they work overtime. Right. And so, in some ways, I wasn't surprised by that. I was surprised by the flip flop there, because that's telling me that a lot of technicians are more concerned with the floor than they are the ceiling. Right. And, and so that is something that did stick out. Traditional flat rate was actually up a little bit versus flat rate with a guarantee, which also kind of surprised me. With automotive technicians, 21% said that they wanted traditional flat rate. 22% said flat rate with a guarantee. So, I as we're digging into this data, the more and more I want to reach out and talk to some technicians to get their thinking behind that, because that's almost saying the opposite, where they're not as concerned with the floor as the ceiling. And so then traditional flat rate actually went up versus flat rate with a guarantee.
Yeah. It's I don't know. Of course, I'm not a technician. I just always hated. I get the consistency, knowing what you're going to bring home. Totally get that. I've always hated being handcuffed, though, man, and saying, well, this is what you make and this is what you make. And I'm killing it. My guy, and I'm talking about other industries, my guy next to me he's sleeping in the bathroom doing half the stuff, and he's going to make what I make. I'm big on meritocracy too. So it's there's the rub, I guess.
Yeah, I agree. I think I think shops think that way too, right? In that there's concern if a technician wants to only work hourly because they think they're going to milk it. And I think a lot of owners have been burnt by people that have milked it, right? And so I think some of it comes down to experience of those shop owners over the years and saying, yeah, you know what? I don't want those lazy people coming in and just milking the clock. But they might be discounting that there's some really, really talented people that just, maybe they're that 50-year-old technician out there that's worked on flat rate their entire life, and they just want a nice steady income or maybe it's a diagnostician, somebody that's really good at diagnosing cars, that gets kind of screwed over on flat rate because it takes them longer. And again, I
Yeah.
think I've seen shops really do a good job. A lot of shops do a really good job of adapting to that and making sure that they're taking care of their best, because for a long time with traditional flat rate, that B-level technician made a much better living than the A-level technician, because they could just knock out repetitive work over and over and over again, where an A tech is doing a lot of advanced diagnostics, and a lot of times it's really hard to get paid for those advanced diagnostics in that time. So I think as an industry, we've gotten a little bit better at getting compensated for the time we're actually doing, or that we're putting on a vehicle. But then also, I think we've maybe shifted some of our pay the ways we pay that really advanced person to be able to make sure we're taking care of them.
Yeah. Going to the talking about taking time off and how culturally it's just shifted. A lot of the people say, well, where is it? It was 32% were cool with 4 10-hour days and 32% 5 8-hour days.
That one surprised me.
And I can't remember. I didn't put in the percentage of who said they didn't want to work on weekends. That's probably going to be easier for an independent shop than a dealership, I would think, right?
Yeah. Although there have been, so to walk you through this, we asked preferred work schedule of technicians, and 4 days at 10-hour, 4 tens, right, was at 32%. 5 8-hour days was at 32%. So the exact same percentage for both. And the one that I think is so interesting is that 27% of technicians said they'll work as many hours as they can. And so for those shops that are out there that are saying, just can't find anybody to wants to work, we had a quarter of our audience of technicians say they want to work as many hours as they possibly can. So that tells you that there's some motivation out there. That tells you that, maybe that flat rate crowd really, really loves that, right? Like if they could work a bunch of hours and put out a bunch of time, they can make really, really good money. And there are so many examples now where maybe we didn't have it 10 years ago of technicians making a killing, right? Like they're doing very, very well for themselves. And so I do think we have so many more stories around that, but that also gives them the incentive to want to work more hours. So again, it's one of those, if you're an owner, you kind of put that in the pro bucket, because you're like, okay, like you get those motivated people that want to put out a bunch of hours. It's going to make us more profitable as a company. Great. Let's get them to work as many hours as they can. And so I think even that is something, as you look at it, you could really dissect and start to understand, how many of those, as many hours as I can work, were flat rate technicians versus hourly technicians, right? Because that's something we don't currently know and would be fascinating to see.
Yeah. This may be just common, and I want to, so we won't stay on it, but the commute time, is that both ways, or is that total?
So the way we asked the question was the max commute that you would be willing to travel for the right job. Okay. And so we try to explain that one out a little bit more, because, we had 48% say 30 to 59 minutes. So they're willing to drive up to an hour for the right opportunity. And so it wasn't that that's what they want. They don't want to drive an hour, but that they'd be willing to for the right opportunity. And so there were some, even that one was kind of crazy, because there were 2% that said they'd be willing to drive 90 plus minutes over. So I think when you look at that, I've talked to several technicians in like the San Francisco area where it's so expensive to live that they just simply can't live there. And so I had talked to a technician at one point that was traveling like 2.5 hours from Oregon to go to San Francisco on a train to work, both ways. Right. And so 5 hours out of your day, but he was making so much money in San Francisco relative to where he was at that it made sense for him and his family. So, I think, again, it's different strokes for different folks. Some people like the drive, some people hate the drive. I go back and forth myself, right? Like our office is a half an hour away from where I live at. And some days, excuse me, some days it's really nice to sit back and relax. Other days it sucks.
Yeah. Yeah. The working remotely's ruined me, man. Which I tried it in the early 2000s. I was working from home then, and it wasn't the norm. And boy, I don't want to have to go to the store. I don't want to have to get out at all if I don't have to. Okay, Jay, we're running close on time. I know you have another obligation. The satisfaction with the current employer, I do want to end on that, or at least touch on that. The numbers have gotten worse, right?
Yeah. So technician satisfaction with current employer, I think this one, again, has some things that are pretty alarming. About a quarter of technicians said that their shops help out local schools. Not all that great. We talk about communication consistently, and one of the biggest concerns in our industry is that shop leadership doesn't communicate well with technicians. And so we saw that in the survey. Only 34% of technicians said that their leadership communicates effectively with them. And that's actually down 13% from last year. So again, we're not moving in the right direction. And that's a big concern, right? Like that stinks. Like we need to get better at it. It's really easy to say we're going to get better at communication, but sometimes it's just really hard to do.
Yeah. And the net promoter score, this kind of goes to the, the squeaky wheel gets the grease, but I mean, that's a big jump, right? From last year.
Yeah. So I think most people are somewhat familiar with net promoter score, but the promoters are ranked 9 and 10 that they would recommend the industry to one of their peers or to somebody outside the industry. And so we only had 10% of automotive technicians say that they would recommend this industry. We had, 22%, which was down 10%, that were passive, 7 or 8. 68% ranked at 1 to 6, which is plus 10%, meaning that they would not recommend this industry to a friend or family member. And so the fact that that's gone down that much, that the detractors have increased, is obviously a huge concern. We need our best and brightest to speak positively about this industry. And right now we're having a tough time with that. And we really need to look at ourselves in the mirror and figure out how we go about that differently.
Jay, any closing final thoughts? I know your voice is giving out on you.
I'm so sorry. My voice is just like giving out here, but for parting thoughts, I think I'd love for everybody to truly read through the survey, read through the data, understand what it says. Some of the graphs are a little harder to read, but if you take the time to truly understand what it says and then look in the mirror from your shop's perspective to see how you do, how good are you at those things? And if you're being honest, there's probably a lot of opportunities for improvement. Use those in your management conversations. Use those in your communication with your technicians. Use them anywhere you can, but just understand the data and use it to improve your operation.
This episode was made possible thanks to a proud partnership with Vesperio, which provides tailored solutions to ignite automotive dealership fixed operations, performance, and profit.